the eels have a way of just spinning around, and they do these like figure eight things, and they just go really fast because they have this eel anatomy, and they just kind of like clobber around and they eat food in their wake, and they do it in the stupidest way possible, but they evolve. And I'm like, go away, you damn eels. There's this obvious infinite aspect of fractals, but for me that wasn't the clincher. The fact that with a very small expression, by recursively iterating that, this immense complexity would grow out of it. So there was this emergence. Oh, my great grandfather, I did that when I was 8 years old.
Get
That
out.
one. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness. Yeah, this is Horizon Worlds. It's Meta's
Okay.
current metaverse.
I think that most people don't want to have a thing in front of their face. Facebox, some people call it.
If there are any broad lessons that can be learned from, applicable to our lives or animal life, from artificial life. And one thing I thought of was something to the degree that you kind of intimated at before, is like, don't be boring or we'll turn you off.
So in other words, if an artificial life is boring, then we're going to shut it down. And I came to all of this through art, right? You know, there have been times when I feel like I'm close to doing science or math or philosophy. You know, really the easiest thing is to say I'm an artist, and I'm, you know, venturing into these different areas. And I think that's appropriate and useful to do that. It's a constant learning experience.
Jeffrey Ventrella is an algorithmic artist, animated artificial life developer, and programmer. With a master's degree from the MIT Media Lab, he co-founded the virtual worlds company There.com and was a senior developer on Second Life. He wrote the book Virtual Body Language, about avatars and the future of nonverbal communication on the internet. Working at the intersection of art, science, and math, he is a passionate, lifelong student of Darwinian evolution. Jeffrey, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I've been following you for a little over a year now. I discovered you when doing research for a video I did on the edge of chaos, which related to cellular automata. And I just fell in love with your work, and I'm so happy to be speaking with you. So thanks for coming on.
And I saw that video, and it was great. I was really loved it.
Thank you. So I think a good place to start would be at the beginning. So I'd love to hear, if you wouldn't mind sharing. I know you're born in Virginia, and it would be awesome to hear about your earliest memory of creating art.
Gosh, it was, you know, it's funny. I just realized one memory is I was at A.M. Davis School, and I remember being escorted out from the classroom to the art room by some teachers. And I think that that was a point I remember. It's strong in my memory. And they took me to the art room, and I did some art. And there was something about it, like, this little boy needs to go into the art room, right?
Huh.
And I don't know, how old would I have been? 7, 8 or something like that. And I think it was that early that I identified as an artist.
Wow.
My parents met in art school, actually.
Oh, okay. So you have a history. I mean, your parents instituted that at a young age.
Yeah. Dad was commercial art. Mom was fashion design. Yeah.
Okay. So interesting. Eclectic household, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So that was an early time. And then, of course, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it was drawing and painting, and you know, I remember doing a clay sculpture of my dad's head, and you know, getting into all different mediums and stuff, and yeah.
So it was an early one, and you then decided to go to, was that when you went to Syracuse, or did you have a stop before then?
So I went to Virginia Commonwealth University in the art department, yeah. And after a year of art foundation, I started with a major in art history, and then I switched to art education with a minor in art history. But I took a lot of studio classes. I took as many studio classes as I could, and it was a really great experience.
Oh, wonderful! Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
And then you, because I know your full story. The audience is getting to learn about you, and one of the things that I know we had discussed before was that you had a pretty early significant moment with Koch curves, I believe, or Koch curve. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce it.
Koch, yeah.
Koch, yeah.
Well, so after After I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University, I discovered fractals. In fact, my brother brought home a computer and said, "Hey, there's this thing. We need to try this out. It's called fractals." I go, "Yeah, I've heard about it." And so it was the language basic on this old clunky computer, monochrome, and I learned how to write the code. I didn't understand the code. I just sort of copied it from the example, and yeah, I was blown away. I think it was because I was already thinking geometrically, and I was already kind of playing around with cell animation and exploring the geometry. And so this was it opened up a whole new world for me. It was epiphany. And I think in retrospect, I realized that there was a new visual language that I was learning existed. And that visual language was very, it kind of provided a metaphor for natural growth and the algorithms of nature. And even though I couldn't express it in that way, that's kind of what I was seeing.
Oh, interesting.
With the fractals.
I'm actually going to, if you don't mind, screen share a little bit here.
Can't wait to see what you're going to show.
Yeah. Can you see this on your side?
There
fractal?
It is. Yeah, there's
Koch curve.
Koch snowflake. Yeah.
Koch snowflake. Yeah, I have two versions. This is one, and then the other one over here is for people to see. This is like the never-ending zoom.
Yep.
Which is so interesting. And you said you even remember like that day, right? It was something about like riding home or.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, there's this obvious infinite aspect of fractals. But for me, that wasn't the clincher. It was like the fact that with a very small expression, by recursively iterating that, this immense complexity would grow out of it. So there was this emergence. And that was what excited me about it. So the fact that this curve could be tweaked into another kind of a curve, like a different species, and they're all related to each other, and they all have different constraints, and there are family resemblances between them, which is, of course, the theme of a book that I've written since then. So that was what excited me.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's mesmerizing for sure. I love, I enjoy fractals. Actually, it's an area I have to understand a little bit better for myself, because I feel like I think I was reading something of yours, or it was one of these different things that you had pointed out, that there's like, it's not just one first, second, third dimension. There can be an in-between dimensional number. So you can have 1.9 dimensions, right?
Right. And one way to think of that is if you have a straight line, and if you start to make it curly and crinkly, and keep making it more and more crinkly, but never let it overlap itself, there you go. That's there. You're bringing up a good example of that. Sure. This is my own animation showing a curve that I discovered in the 80s. It's called Dragon of Eve, named after Eve Peterson, who was my mother's art teacher when she was a young girl.
Oh, wonderful.
And here's let's see, yep, this is the dragon curve, right? Showing how it animates. There's so many different ways to show this, but this is one that I like.
Yeah, and this is video. For all the viewers, I'll post all the videos, all the links in the description, so if people want to dive down into and see in more depth how this works.
Right. Yeah. This is sort of, I wanted to show how this worked with pieces of paper to make it sort of visceral and easy to understand. So yeah, so you can construct this curve, and it shows how how iteration creates these different variations.
You had done this on a Commodore 64, right?
Yes. My first computer, Super 8 film. Frame by frame, a friend of mine rigged up a little thing where I could a little signal would come from the basic program and tell the camera to shoot a frame. So this would go on every day. I think actually it started out I was doing it myself, and I got a blister on my thumb from clicking frames so many times. But this was all done frame by frame on Super 8. And then when I started going to Syracuse University, I took these Super 8 videos and I converted them Super 8 films, and I converted them to video and added sound. So this was my first video.
Wow, and this was from mid 80s.
Yeah.
Wow.
And as you can see, I don't know if this is the best example, but
Sure.
I was interested in taking the formula for the fractal curve and tweaking it, gradually, as if you were turning knobs on the DNA itself. And so this isn't about the infinite detail. It's more about the biomorphic expression and the
Gotcha.
variations within.
Absolutely, yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Kind of influenced by Richard Dawkins' biomorphs, if you're familiar
Okay.
with those.
Yeah, vaguely, yeah, absolutely. And there's just the fractals. And just before we go on, sort of the next stage, I'd love to also share, if you don't mind, some of my favorite artwork of yours, some of your older stuff. I hope it's okay. This one just
Sure.
really stuck out to me.
Yeah. Well, I had been playing around with polyhedra for a long time and really exploring that. And there are many polyhedron freaks out there who would sympathize with me for being obsessed with them. But I wanted to try to combine the sleek perfection of polyhedra with the chaotic nature of fractals and just kind of play around with that.
Yeah, these are really just fantastic.
And drawings, yeah.
This one
Yeah,
stuck
so
out to
so
me.
some of these themes kind of crept into my drawings and paintings. But at this point I wasn't doing very much drawing and painting anymore.
Interesting.
These were just, yeah. My
Why
wife
did you? Oh, sorry.
my wife and I did this. She
Oh,
we did this on an airplane. We were traveling somewhere and we kind of did a collaborative drawing.
No, I love it. It's really great. It's this one as well stuck out to me.
Oh, my great grandfather. I did that when I was 8 years old.
Get
That
out.
one. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow,
that
that's
was
impressive. Yeah, no wonder they brought you to art class. Like this kid needs to be. It's a wonderful painting. And then this is a website that I will also link in the description for people who want to dive into some more of your fractal
Yeah.
work.
Right. This is just a hodgepodge of some of my earlier experiments, and I was really interested in tweaking the equation of the Mandelbrot set, kind of taking a sacrilegious approach to complex analysis and just throwing it out of its normal space. And so if you scroll up a little bit, the Mandelbrot set, yeah, these are tweaks.
Right,
And I actually wrote a genetic algorithm years later to make to try to get the Mandelbrot set to imitate faces and real images. So a kind of an imitation thing. Slightly inspired by the movie The Thing, if you saw
Oh
that.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
The thing would consume a creature and then eat its DNA, and from its DNA it would imitate it.
Interesting. Cool.
So that's kind of what the genetic algorithm was doing with the Mandelbrot set.
So cool. And this is where I saw the thing about the fractal dimension being, and I knew this before too, but it's something that I think I have to see it turning, because as you described, it's sort of the breaking through the plane, so to speak. I mean, it's something it goes off the plane that it's on, right?
Well, if you click on that image,
Sure.
you can see that this image, this is one single curve, right? So all of my fractal curve designs are made with one line. That's kind of the theme. And this is not two dimensions. So if this curve were to coil itself more and more, it would fill all of space. Like if you could zoom, you would never see any empty space anymore. But this is not two dimensions. This is like, I don't know, 1.7 or something like that. Right. And those are the most interesting fractal curves, in my opinion, because they leave these areas that make it more pictorial.
It's incredible. It's really cool. And then what else did we have here? Creatures of the Complex Plane. Also, yeah, this is
Very
published in
early work.
1988. Yeah, this is your very early stuff.
Yeah,
It's like a
yeah,
zoological forms.
yeah. I was just kind of thinking in those terms. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then gotta include this. Gotta show you. Gotta show the people this one.
Yeah, I was projecting
Bringing
them
you back.
onto myself. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Why not? Your body's a work of art too. So
Yeah, I wouldn't do that these days, but at the time.
oh, you could pull it off. Come on. This one too. Oh, Walker.
Right. This was an important thing for me because I'd been learning about artificial life, and I decided to give it a try. This is before I even knew what a genetic algorithm was. I came up with an asexual reproduction scheme, and this is pretty clunky physics. But I think the idea was interesting enough that I showed it to Chris Langton, and he presented it at an artificial life conference in Santa Fe. I almost went to that conference, but I became ill at the time and I couldn't make it, which was too bad because that would have been a really exciting thing for me. But yeah, this is old and clunky, isn't it?
I'm just thinking too for our audience. Some folks might not be familiar with artificial life. Can you give like a definition for what that entails?
Yeah, artificial life can mean a lot of different things, but at the time, in the conferences that I was part of, biologists, robot people, philosophers, computer scientists, and artists were all welcome in this think space, and contributing. And it's really looking at what exactly makes life happen. And I like to think of artificial life as an answer to a good old-fashioned AI, which was trying to achieve AI through logic and rationality and reason. And the artificial life people were saying we can't really understand intelligence until we understand the embodiment of our existence in the physical world. Intelligence arises in the brain from biological creatures. So simulating something on the level of an ant or even a bacterium is a good starting point for getting to AI.
Sure.
So I've always resonated with that idea, and that's kind of partly why I was so interested in artificial life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for myself, I discovered it a few years back, and once I got a taste for it, I said, this is interesting. This is really cool. There's something here. And I think sort of in the same way that you saw I think it probably makes the jump is easier with artificial life than it is for fractals. I think a lot of people may not see the connection between fractals and nature. We will talk about that later, though. We're going to come back around the circle because especially you have a presentation that you did on biophilia that was fantastic that we will cover for sure. We're going to talk about fractals in a bit. But yeah, artificial life, the fact that you can test evolution, test ideas, test hypotheses, not be stuck with just the fossil record or just your theories or just doing real time,
Yeah,
it's incredible.
it is incredible. Yeah. And when I think it was Richard Dawkins, either The Selfish Gene or The Extended Phenotype, one of those books, where he said, I want to see artificial life simulations that don't use the standard genetic algorithm. No fitness function. Nature does not use a fitness function. Fitness is basically the same as reproduction. So that's what inspired me to make Genepool, which we can look at later.
Yes,
Yeah.
we will definitely touch on Genepool, and I can't wait to dive into that and sort of do a live demo. So we're going to jump around in there. I think that'd be really fun to test out. So cool. So we have this. So we have the early idea, sort of pre-25 or so of your life, kind of discovering fractals, and but it does sound your discovery of fractals was a real turning point in your career, in your life. You kind of found something that you're truly passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And software seemed to come natural to me, which is weird and ironic because I never got past algebra. In fact, in college, I failed the lowest math class you could possibly take because I was just not fit for that kind of math. But as soon as I discovered programming, all of a sudden I had a reason to care about mathematics. It's the sine wave or the number pi. You know, these things suddenly became interesting because they were part of my tool set for making art.
Cool.
That changed it for
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. So I'd love to, yeah, as you just kind of alluded to, after coming out of the MIT Media Lab, or was it out of Syracuse, you then went into the gaming world. You went to Silicon Valley.
Right, right. So after my BFA at VCU, I went to Syracuse, and that was a really interesting art department. I worked under Ed Zajac, who came from Yugoslavia, and he was a painter who then got into programming, similar to Harold Cohen, who I think is still in UCSD, who I worked under after Syracuse. Then I came back east. I did a bunch of ping ponging, went back east and went to MIT, the Media Lab, and that's where a lot of this stuff kind of culminated. And I got my third degree there. Then,
Snapping up degrees.
yeah, at that point I was like, okay, that's enough. So then I met Nuala, who became my wife, and we went to San Francisco, and I started working in the games industry, doing simulation style games.
Gotcha. And your first stop was at Rocket Science Games?
Rocket Science Games, yeah. I was prototyping different games. And about a year after I was there, I started working on an artificial life thing called Darwin Pond. And I did that in collaboration with Brian Dodd and various other people there. Yeah, I was at Rocket Science for about 2 years.
Cool.
And then after that, I joined Will Harvey to create a virtual world called there.com.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just want to share this quick
Yeah.
clip from Rocket Science Games. Yeah, YouTube has everything.
Yeah.
Do
Oh,
you remember
interesting.
this?
I do not, but I can tell
Oh,
you that Rocket Science Games was doing this thing called Sillywood. Silicon Graphics meets Hollywood, and
yeah.
they were, you know,
Right.
their big thing for a while was to mix the cinematic production and techniques with software. But that didn't turn out too well. And so then they said, well, we need to bring some people in who can do simulation type games, because that's the next big thing. And that's when I came in, and we started doing physics-based programming and more virtual world type stuff.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
this stuff, yeah, I think I did a little research on Rocket Science. Sounded like they were really into I think it was called FMV, full motion video stuff.
Yeah,
Having
yeah.
that be a big part of the gaming, but perhaps it wasn't, I don't know, interesting enough for people
Yeah,
to take
either
to
they
it.
were ahead of either they were ahead of their time, or it just wasn't the right equation for fun games. Yeah.
Gotcha. But you came on to do
Yeah.
help them move in a new direction. What kind of games did you work on there?
I worked on a thing called Ganymede, which was really fascinating, and I think it was turned into a product. The idea of Ganymede being, I think is it a moon of Jupiter or Saturn, and it's covered with ice. And the idea was that there's this giant spaceship that was heavy, but it would put heat down and vaporize the ice, and so it would float on its own cushion of air. And I created the physics so that it would be flying around, sort of staying on the surface, and it would fall into a crater and then fly out of the crater. And there were these cameras behind it, which would be like little drones that the enemy could take out. And those were your views of yourself. And it was just so fun to work on. I remember driving home in the evenings thinking, okay, I'm not driving the spaceship. Be careful, Jeffrey. I'm not driving the spaceship. All day long, I'd be thinking about this stuff. And it was so
Right.
internalized. Those were fun times.
Yeah, different times. What did you take? Well, like, what kind of lessons did you learn there? What was it like your first experience? I guess your first professional, like working experience, like in non-art. I mean, it's still artistic, obviously, but
Yeah.
commercially, that was a big part of it.
Well, I think I could tell early on that I wasn't the best fit for that kind of environment. But as long as I was doing prototyping and innovating in new game mechanics and things of that sort, I was happy. So much creative work was being done then.
Yeah.
And then especially after that, when we started doing the virtual world, That was very creative time.
Cool. And do you want to talk about how did there.com start? Like, what was the process of moving to do that?
Well, basically, Will Harvey was part of Rocket Science Games, and then he said, "Hey Jeff, let's start a company." And so we did that, and I worked a year on just the prototype, and that prototype allowed Will to bring in some more funding. The company grew to I think more than 100 people, and I wrote the first line of code.
Wow.
It probably ended up in the prototype bucket, but then I added more later. And then the avatar thing started happening, right? I didn't think I would ever get into this, but because I was doing artificial life and creating these sort of simulated sentience of animals and things, I started developing that in the avatars. And then I started working with Chuck Clanton, who brought a lot of cinematic design experience and psychology into it. And we worked on the chat bubble scheme, and there are a couple of patents that I helped with on those technologies. And that just opened up a whole interesting world of virtual body language, which that eventually was the name of the book that I wrote after several years of that.
Cool. Yeah. And we are going to talk about virtual body language quite a bit. I do want to do a little bit of, if you don't mind, I think this is more of the modern version of there.com. It's probably much more advanced in terms of graphics, but potentially this is look and feel somewhat similar. I don't know if you could comment if you've even taken a look at there.com lately, what it's like.
Yeah, well, we had this battle, as probably many companies have, where there were a certain group of people that wanted the avatars to be as realistic as possible. And I was arguing against that, suggesting that expression and expressivity does not require realism. And in fact, too much shading and texture can interrupt with that. This is, harks back to the Scott McCloud understanding comics theories and all of that. So I'm not necessarily thrilled about the way they came out looking, but it's kind of cool. As you can see, the physics isn't quite great with the way the feet slide around on the surface. So, we had a lot of the same issues that come up in other virtual worlds. And obviously, once I started working at Linden Lab on Second Life, I started using these avatar techniques there, continuing the work in avatar expression there.
Yeah. And so you were at there.com for a bit, then Second Life. So a very similar kind of experience, I can imagine. This is, I think, a relatively newer, this must be. I'm showing these video clips, and it's hard to get, say, the video from 20 years ago, 20 plus years. This is like a much more, I know Second Life isn't what it used to be in terms of, active users. I think it's somewhere in like the 20 to 50,000 range now. But it was the rage for a bit there. And what was it like to work there what period were you there for? Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't remember the years, early 2000s, mid. But, the first thing I did was I worked on the follow cam because they wanted to have a better cinematic experience. So I worked on the follow cam, and I just created this sort of whole interface for telling the camera to follow things, like particularly vehicles. And there are certain tightness and looseness in the angular space as well as the translational for making this work well. And obviously, as any game developer knows, cameras getting stuck behind trees or falling into walls is always an issue. Yeah. That's something that's been worked through so many times by now. But as you can see, we're looking at the posterior of an avatar. And at there.com, we were trying to get around that by saying this is all about chat. It's all about interaction with people, expressing with each other. So with Chuck Clanton, we worked on ways to bring that camera around to the front of your face, right? and we had these things called chat props, I believe they were. So the avatars would come together and sit on a log or on a park bench or something, and all of a sudden the cameras would go, okay, we're in a conversation, and the cameras would kind of do their thing and become more intelligent.
Sure.
You could see faces and stuff like, and the chat balloons would be visible. This is a whole thing that there are 2 or 3 patents actually on this technology.
Mm-hmm. What was it like? I mean, working, late 90s, early 2000s, exciting time at Silicon Valley. Obviously, there was the dot-com bust.
Right.
So that must have been kind of difficult. People, companies getting
Yeah.
started up and stuff. But was it exciting being there at that time? Was it exciting working at these places?
By the time I was at Linden Lab, I think a lot of the excitement, I had kind of been through all of that, and I was a little less excited about it. I was never really a participant. I was always a builder, and that confused people sometimes, because a lot of people that worked at Linden Lab were already avid users who were so familiar with the platform that they became developers. And I actually believed and still believe that they needed more outside people to keep it fresh and not too insular. So it was exciting. I remember one day some guy came in and said, "Oh, we just got this wonderful review in whatever magazine." I was like, "Uh-oh, this is not good."
What?
Because I felt as if too much public attention before you're ready to make a product can kind of screw things up.
Sure.
There's different opinions here and there on how that works.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're not a gamer yourself.
No, not really.
Never got into gaming, but you were working in gaming, so.
Unless you count Tetris, Dig Dug, Ganymede, those things.
I count
Really.
Tetris. Yeah, that's a game.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And then
It's not a game, it's an obsession. It's an addiction.
Oh, interesting. Do you dream in Tetris?
No, but I probably did a few times.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And before I do, we're going to unpack, and I want to get into virtual body language in a few, but I do want to get maybe your general thoughts around, I'm just going to screen share this as well, so you can still see this on your side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Horizon Worlds. It's Meta's current metaverse. Or this is actually a little bit older, but I think it's still representative of what it looks like. Have you had a chance to play around with Facebook's offering at all, or no?
I haven't. No.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's really fun to be in there. I think that most people don't want to have a thing in front of their face, Facebox, some people call it, for very long. In fact, I did a project in virtual reality using the HoloLens, the Microsoft HoloLens, and I had to literally program the virtual world while wearing it.
Oh my God!
Which was like crazy. It's kind of fun in a way, but after about 15 minutes of your head in this thing, you're like, get me out of here.
Yeah, your eyes need to adjust, and it's kind of distorting. And...
So this is one of the pervasive problems of virtual reality, is that you are closed off from the world and completely immersed, which is the idea. But I think a lot of people have been saying that augmented reality probably has a much better future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can tell that you're.
For all those
if you
reasons.
had to choose between the two sides, you're more AR than VR.
Not that they.
Not that they're competing. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. But.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to try it out, but as you pointed out, I think most people don't want something boxy on their face, and the stuff that I guess I am skeptical of it, as many people are. There's a lot of bad. I don't want to just dive onto Facebook here, but there has been a lot of bad press about it, and many people who are not believers, but I'm willing to be, as we get an ad here, let me just stop that. Willing to be change my mind if they have some kind of killer thing.
Sure.
It just doesn't seem like they're working on like workspaces and for people to be working within that reality, and it doesn't seem to be. It's like a solution without a problem, almost.
Right. maybe Apple could get away with that philosophy. Also Facebook has already become disfavored by so many people already that Meta just, uh, it didn't fix it for a lot of people.
Right, absolutely. Cool. So we got some your thoughts there. And then would love to hear too, you can bounce to virtual body language, which is in the mail for me. I'm expecting it very soon. I can't wait to read it. I have checked out some of your sample chapters online, and they're very cool and very interesting stuff I haven't really considered or thought about myself, but when you start to work your head around it, it becomes really interesting.
Yeah, well, I really wanted to kind of bring biology, psychology, cognitive science, and cinema, and all these other disciplines and areas of knowledge to bear on what it means to make your virtual self expressive as you are. And I discovered this book called Becoming Beside Ourselves, philosophy book by Brian Rotman, which really influenced my thinking. I think one of the interesting things that came out from this research was, we have two different ways of broadcasting our virtual selves. One is with direct broadcasting of all of our emotions and our voice, right? That's what video chat is. That's what we're doing right now. Avatars are mediated. They are artificial, and you have a choice as to what to show or not. If I sneeze, my avatar is not going to sneeze. Unless I have a complete motion capture system working, which is catching every single motion of my body. But that's usually not what people want in a virtual world. They want to have a longer leash, right? In a sense, which is a term that Steve DiPaolo uses in describing body language. So having a longer leash so that you're not controlling everything, you're puppeteering at a distance. And there's this whole gradation of control that is a very important piece of this. I think some people don't think in that space. I think it's useful to think in that space. And also in the process of working on this book and doing research at SFU up in Vancouver with Maggie Seifeld Nasser and other people out there, doing research on virtual humans and nonverbal communication. These issues that we're already having on social media, the tribalism that comes out of that seems to boil up in the internet. I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of social signaling that we normally have in life, and our neuroplastic brains make up for that, and it's very distortive, I think. So this touches on, if I were to ever do a new edition of this book, I would like to bring in a lot of the issues of email, social media, and all of the ills that
Sure.
we struggle with.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of language is communication is nonverbal, and it's just so difficult unless you are looking directly at somebody to pick up on a million tiny cues that you forget we do all the time.
And they are mostly unconscious. They even include pheromones and the environment of the room, the energy of other people in the room, the time of the day, your body chemistry, everything. It's vastly unconscious. And I think because so much of it is unconscious, people, particularly people in the tech world, they don't see it or they don't acknowledge it. I think that there's a lot of focus on the verbal and the high salient expressive pieces, but there's this giant back channel of life that is completely missing.
Sure. Do you see any signs that this will improve, get better? Are you optimistic for the future in that regard?
I wouldn't be surprised if there were a big movement away from the internet and technology into real face-to-face stuff, just as a reaction. But Yeah, it's hard to say how it's going to come about. I mean, I think, virtual reality is definitely growing, and hard to say. Hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to predict. I know. I just like trying to look out forward and see either warning signs or positive signposts as well for going forward. I wish you were. I hope you're right. I can find myself. I mean, I quite often fall into a sort of a Luddite like frame of mind where even though we're talking over the internet and there's wonderful things that this is able to provide us, right? This conversation wouldn't happen without all the technology, and this is going to go on YouTube and other podcast platforms. That kind of exposure and scale is amazing, but what are we sacrificing for? I can't remember who said something like, no one stops to ask if we should do this stuff. We just do it and then see, right? And if there are, commercial reasons to do it, to make money, then people will just fold in. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go.
Yeah. I'd be curious what you think after you read the book. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait to dive into it. And this was one, because you do have a few sample chapters on your site, which I will link to. I'm trying to remember. This was one image that kind of had, I think, composed a few different things. You have.
Yeah. Right. We came up with these sort of visual things that come out of your head that are sort of visual language icons that express what you're thinking. Obviously, facial expressions, gaze, and eye contact. I've written and thought a lot about eye contact and gaze. And there's a lot of biology behind this. I believe that the rotational movement of your eyeball is the fastest thing in the human body.
Wow.
And because of saccades, the fact that our eyes dart around in order to take snapshots unconsciously and stitch together reality. That has to be really fast. And not only is it fast for our own perception of the world, but for communicating with other people. And it's no surprise that the human face has turned into a sign, right? More than any other animal, it's a sign. It's an expression giver and receiver. So I think that's an interesting way to think about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also gaze is not just your eyes, it's your head and your body as well. There were some researchers at Stanford who were working on this. Like, there's this gaze with the eye, this one, and then doing with your head, and then your whole body.
Sure.
All these layers of attention that go into it.
What I would love to see, and actually when I was at Google, I worked at Google for 8 years in advertising there. Yeah. I
didn't know that.
You mentioned that too. Yeah. On the advertising side, though, not on the tech side. But I did know some engineers there, and at one point in time, they were kind of playing around with the idea of actually having the camera within the screen itself. So you could, ideally, you'd be looking at the eye, like exactly at the eye level of the person you're talking to, because otherwise you're always off. It's always
by the way,
else.
do you realize you don't know this? Because you don't know what I'm seeing on Zoom. Your screen is this little postage stamp off to the right, and I'm looking at you because I want to look at you. But when I look at you, I'm not looking at the camera. Right. And that just slight difference is noticeable, and I'm sure the viewers are like, right? Before we started talking, I was trying to get your face right below the camera so I would look at you. But these are the sort of the discontinuities that happen. That need to be addressed.
Yeah, I have my phone with a better camera than on my computer, but I have the camera as close as I can get to your eye level, so that it's like I can't do much better. Otherwise, I could have your face covered by my camera, in which case I'm missing out on all your cues, but I am then looking directly at you. That's strange.
There was even research that I heard about where there would be cameras around the edges of the screen, and they would all combine to create eye direction. They would sort of fake my gaze to be where I'm actually looking. So that's an interesting technology there.
That is interesting. I think I can't remember where I saw it. It might have been on your WordPress blog potentially, or maybe it was a rabbit hole off of that, where they found that people in video conferences, when they were screen sharing, they found the level of connection was better, or people found more because they were looking at the same thing. Like we maybe we're not looking at each other, but at least we are in agreement on the thing on the screens that we're looking at. So potentially that could be better. Does that ring a bell? I'll look into it and try to put in the description if I can find that.
Yeah, no, I think those are the kinds of problems that come up in video conferencing.
One experience I'd love to talk to you about, I know, it might be even potentially difficult to talk about, but it was Wiggle Planet. Because on your bio it says, I know you might change this, but at age 52, Jeffrey decided it was time to put his best foot forward. He founded Wiggle Planet with the help of Ken Pierce.
Right. Well, as I mentioned to you before, it wasn't my best foot because, my best foot is not starting a company and running it and making money. But we did make some really interesting stuff and got some I think some interesting apps done. It was a great experience. But what I really wanted to do was to take a lot of what I had been working on over the years. Actually, click that bird. Go to the top and click that. Scroll up to the top. Yeah, click the bird.
Me. Let me get closer so that people can actually see it.
But click and drag it around. This is actually something that Brian Dodd worked on more recently. Are you able to click and move it around?
I'm trying to on my side. Let me reload the page. Maybe it's because I tried zooming in.
I just wanted to show that it's interactive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, move it
I
around.
can move it around. Yeah, you're right. Oh my goodness.
Right.
Hey,
so it's
along.
completely responsive. So, the idea here is that this is an animated bird, but it's not created the usual animation technique. It's running with real-time physics and algorithms and sensory stuff and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's Peck Peck. And this is a video about Wiggle Planet, and I'm describing the whole idea and stuff.
Yeah. No, it's really cool technology. And I watched you gave a presentation in a classroom. I can't remember what the name of it is, but you were live demoing the tech. And it was very impressive, very cool stuff.
Yeah, we were using augmented reality on this, the kind where you hold up your iPhone or iPad or mobile device and you can see the creatures overlaid on top of the environment. And we wanted to really kind of bring the virtual world of these creatures into the real environment and take advantage of everything that comes out of that. So, and this is before Pokemon Go came up with their
you beat
their
them.
thing.
You beat
Well,
them
not exactly beat them, but we were working on it, and we did timing wise. We created this thing where you could drop a wiglet somewhere in the world, and its genes would be geolocated. So anybody else who's in that part of the world can pick up the wiglet and see it in augmented reality. And you wouldn't be able to see it unless you were literally there in Dubai or Dublin or in the Sahara, wherever the wiglet, wherever there's internet, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. So it was an idea of distributing their genes around the globe and having a sort of a worldwide genetic distribution, letting a genetic algorithm run around the world where the people are the fitness function was the idea. And I may be able to resuscitate that at some point. So I think it's still a good idea.
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, especially, I think the thing that really got my attention was you had the little bird and it was walking around and you had the book right next to it and the bird walks into the book.
Yeah.
And then you open the book and the bird is there. It's in an egg. I mean, it's beautiful technology. It's fantastic.
We had a whole, the apps aren't working, unfortunately, and there's a whole story to that. But we had a whole experience for young people with the book that the characters jump out of the book and they become part of the world outside of the book. So
that's so amazing. And I mean, I know you said, not your best foot forward because you know, running a company or being on the business side, perhaps it didn't fit your skill set, or you didn't. But what did you get? I mean, do you think it's still a valuable experience to kind of go through that? Like, what did you learn?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was a great experience, and I worked with a lot of great people, and we've continued to collaborate on other areas. Um, and just to kind of see how it works. It was a great experience. It was an adventure.
Oh, yeah. See, that's great to hear.
Hmm.
And do you think broadly? I mean, you definitely know a lot of creative types, a lot of people who share your interest. Do you think that there's an overemphasis generally on, say, like entrepreneurship in our culture? Do you think that's something that a lot of, say, creative types feel like a pressure to kind of, monetize their skill? I mean, I know that there's a desire to, of course, because it's what you're passionate about, what thing that you want to work on every day, you want that to be. But do you think like, I guess like the Sharktankification is what I'm kind of alluding to, this idea that, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're getting hosed or something.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, entrepreneurs are, the guy down the road that runs a taco truck. He's an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Entrepreneurs are everywhere. They just they don't necessarily use VC culture as their environment to raise money and all of that stuff. So I think there's a certain culture that I certainly did not fit into, and a lot of people don't. Um, so yeah, that's all I have to say.
Can you speak to that culture at all? Would you mind, like, what was it like? What did it feel like being there? Oh, yeah, what was the vibe like? I mean, what did people,
I
what do you
think
mean by that?
it's very exploitative. I think creative, smart people are easily exploited, particularly if they're so passionate about what they're working on that they're not paying attention
Mm,
to where the money is moving. Um, so it's a trade-off.
sure. And what finally sparked your, like, what made you make the leap to finally leave in 2007, I believe? You left Linden Labs, Second Life.
Hmm.
Um, how did you make that decision?
Well, let's see. I've never punched anybody, but I felt as if either I walk out the door or I punch somebody, and I've never done that, and I don't know if I ever could. So I walked. Um, and it was in retrospect that I felt like um, um, I don't know if I was the one making the decision, and I
Mhm.
wasn't sure if it was even a decision, but it seems like that started a cascade of mental shifting. Took about 10 years after working in Vancouver, finishing the book, going back to the fractal stuff, um, that I found myself going through another stage of life,
Mm.
um, kind of coming back to full circle. And at one point I would say, "Oh, I feel like I'm coming back full circle," and then 2 years later I would go, "No, I wasn't coming back yet. I wasn't done yet. I think I'm done now." You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
a phase transition that takes longer than you think it would because you don't know how far you have to go to be done with it.
Yeah.
That makes any sense?
Sort of, yeah. It's sort of, you end up in these cycles where you just kind of keep repeating the same pattern over and over again.
Well, it's not just that. It's that being embedded in a certain way of life and a certain
Mhm.
culture and among certain people and having expectations of yourself, you have to shed those little by little and pay attention before you can find yourself again. And I think that there was a long period where I hadn't found myself as in the earlier years when I was in academia and getting art degrees and starting to write papers about artificial life and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
That was pre-industry, I guess you could say,
Mhm.
pre-Silicon Valley, San Francisco tech world. And then leaving that world is kind of the transition that we're talking about. And I'm done. I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
back home. It
Yeah.
feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like a much better spot, and you had
Yeah.
those experiences, you had that adventure,
Hmm.
you know, and now you're coming back full circle to the stuff you're passionate about and stuff you
Mm-hmm.
really put yourself into, and not run into that potential exploitation in that industry, in that space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, some people say that, sometime in your early life, I think it was before age 30 or something, you'll have an idea or something that you've made that becomes the seed of every other idea that you ever have. Whether or not that's true, I find that I can come back to an old idea that was germinating a long time ago, and I can just feed that and new stuff will come out of it. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's a garden that started growing 40 years ago,
Hmm.
and I'm coming back and tending that garden again, and new things are growing out of it.
That's beautiful. It's poetic. It's nice. Yeah.
I think well, not only that, but that's a metaphor for a lot of the fractal geometry and chaos and emergence stuff that's behind the artwork itself.
Absolutely.
So it's a picture inside of a picture.
Oof. Levels. That's cool. Okay, cool. Anything else you want to say about that experience, that period in your life, before we move on to sort of like cellular automata, artificial life, fractals? We can just leave the gaming stuff behind if you want, but it's up to you.
I think, let me think. I'm making this up as I go along.
Sure, we both are. Yeah.
I think, I think it has allowed me to have a political sphere, a lot, thoughts about society, human society, where we're going, and the tech world and technology in general. And I'm pretty Luddite. I'm pretty minimalist. Which surprises a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, MIT, he loves technology in every form. Very, very not true. In fact, as an artist, I want to have the simplest tools possible. I, I, I write all my code in JavaScript. I don't use any plugins. It's all JavaScript and it renders to the HTML canvas. And I like that simplicity because that simplicity provides a constraint, right?
Right.
And constraints are important for creativity. But not only is that a constraint for my own, for my own tool set, allowing me to focus on what emerges from that rather than how those tools are working or not working. It also is a picture of the kind of stuff that I'm building anyway, which is emergent. So it's designing emergent systems, which is this interesting paradox, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you touch on it. Something I'd love to learn more about is, what is your process like? I mean, how do you choose what you work on? Do you have like a daily routine you can run us through? Like, what's your process?
Well, I've got a calendar on the board of all the projects that I want to do. And I always have a list in calendars. And do I finish them all? No. Do I ever get to most of them? No. But they're there, and it's pulling me. I have an artificial life project that I started working on recently, and I'm going to try to get it to a stage where I can submit it to the next Artificial Life Conference, which is going to be held in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And it's based on vestibular senses. So, I had vertigo many years ago when I was in Japan. I had a little too much to drink, and I woke up one morning and the room was spinning. I was terrified, as anybody who's had vertigo would attest. It's terrifying before you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about the three-dimensionality of our inner ear, our semicircular canals, which is a very important sensory organ in humans and other animals. And the semicircular canals correspond to the three axes of rotation in your head, which also correspond to three expressions: yes, no, and the Indian head waggle, which is yeah, maybe okay.
Yeah.
So that whole set of ideas is fascinating to me, but it also provides a motivation for creating an artificial life creature that has bipedal locomotion, that uses the vestibular sense to stay upright. And to build this out of springs and balls, out of the simplest apparatus possible, kind of like that Dutch artist who makes these beautiful walking sculptures that go along the beach, powered by wind. Similar kind of idea of you can see the mechanics working, And then you can see what emerges from that and has a lifelike quality. So I'm interested in that, not just because it looks alive, but it actually works on a mechanism, a feedback adaptive mechanism that allows upright walking. If you've ever seen a bird standing on one foot, like a stork or like, how do they do that? They do that with micromuscular corrections on a tiny, tiny level. You don't see it, but their muscles are just always adjusting. And that's completely unconscious, of course.
Yeah.
So that feedback loop is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I can't wait to see more about it. What do you have a timeline for what that looks like?
Yeah, well, I believe the paper submission is February. So I need to get something working so I can know for sure that it's going to work. I have this little concern that I might not be able to pull it off, but this is something that a lot of researchers have worked on before, and it's just an interesting problem, in my opinion.
Sounds very cool. So great. I'd love to turn on to the next, or maybe the final chapter. Basically, here we have kind of your early work, your career in Silicon Valley, and then I'd love to cover a few things that we're both mutually interested in: cellular automata, artificial life, and fractals. And I have some. I think one of my favorite things of yours is, let me screen share real quick.
Well, this is called clusters. I don't know if it's the greatest name for it, but it's what I call it. And this started, every year I make an Earth Day animation to celebrate Earth Day. And the purpose of the Earth Day yearly animation is twofold: to celebrate Earth and to learn about spherical geometry. So every year I do some cool spherical geometry, and I do research and I learn about it. I was making this sort of thing, and you can find it if you go to Earth Day a couple of years ago. But I realized that there's this really interesting particle system that I was coming up with, and so I made this. It's really based on, there's a video that describes it in there as well. It's based on a very simple idea, which is that blue particles have a certain attraction to red particles, or a certain repulsion to green particles, and so on. So there, you are a particle of a certain color, and all of the other particles of that color have the same sort of genetic relationship with other colors. And because of these repulsions and attractions, all of this emergent structure comes out of it, usually very unexpectedly. One can never know what they're going to see in this. There's another factor, which is the distance. So you can think about these particles as having a view horizon. They can't see beyond a certain point. So if these particles get close enough to each other, their behaviors will start to enact. With the many colors, this is 12 colors, I believe, is happening. So that's 12. There's some exponential combinatorics of how these interactions occur. And so I did a lot of tweaking to get these things to work. And I've got at the bottom here, you can see all these different. Click on mitosis there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
This was. I forgot his name, but the people at Leap Motion thought this was cool. So I did a project at Leap Motion, and what they did, Leap, if you're familiar, they have a system that looks at your fingers and it can reconstruct your hands in 3D space. So what they and I worked on together was this system where you could reach into this blob and move it with your hands, and then you can get small. Where a particle is like a baseball, and you're playing like at that level of scale, and then you can grow again so that you're looking down on it as if you were manipulating a galaxy or something. And the people at Leap Motion are using GPU processing and really hardcore fast graphics. So this is 3D and really super fast. If you ever have a chance to you can do a search for Leap Motion, but anyway. So that was an exciting project, and I'm actually going to come back to this. I think I'm going to use it for the next Earth Day animation.
Yeah, it is very cool. And of course, you have explainer here of
Yeah.
how this works. Oh, I think
Right.
this is the leap motion particles video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to share? Should we share it or? Yeah, here it is. Cluster particle system.
Right. So the people at Leap Motion, they created this wonderful interface that you can control with your virtual hands and tweak all the variables, and then you can reach in and grab a particle. It's just very immersive and very interactive. And who knows? Maybe we'll come back to this someday and turn it into a whole, almost like an educational tool where you can learn about complex dynamical systems. Really,
Sure, yeah.
it's not biology, it's not physics, but it has certain behaviors that allude to physical and biological phenomena.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could even, and it gets pretty complex pretty quickly, but dynamics would say how certain atoms will combine to make molecules, and you can kind of play around with it and get some intuition with the first person playing aspect of that. Yeah.
I'm working with Frank Dell'Aglio, who is a biomolecular physicist and chemist, and he was showing me some equations between atoms that are commonly used to do molecular modeling. And I don't know if I want to try to actually simulate that precisely, but at least perhaps in an abstract sort of tutorial sense of allowing people to put atoms together and see how the forces create these emergent structures. It's great to learn about emergence and to have that as to have like curricula for understanding emergence, and this could be a tool for that.
I agree completely. Yeah, actually, it's funny. Emergence was the very first video I made on YouTube. Is like a 3-minute primer on emergence, and it's
cool stuff. Oh yeah, you showed the pictures of the starlings.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just gorgeous.
So cool. I actually did that animation myself. I mean, I taught myself how to do that easily, like in Keynote. It's rough. It's crude, but
yeah,
I was pretty happy with that.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see that. And that reminds me of what fish do. Aren't there giant schools of fish that will to confuse a shark? They'll just kind of turn into a giant fish and split off into two, and it's amazing what evolution can come up with.
Yeah, it's great. And this is I hope this is coming cleanly over the screen share. If folks want to play on their computers, it runs very seamlessly on a Chrome browser. I mean, you can play around with it and have fun. I think kids might enjoy this as well. And we share also, another thing was the around the concept of the edge of chaos.
Yes.
Which I also did a video about. And
great video.
I don't know if you may. Oh, thank you. You may have checked it out. This is on cellular automata, Wolfram. Also tried to apply it to psychology. One of the things I like to do in general, sort of with my channel, one of the things I'm trying is interconnect different disciplines and try to find connections between them. So that's one thing. So with psychology as well, potentially. And so this was a sort of like a one-sheeter I did around Wolfram's 4 classes, the difference between order and disorder. And I tried to pack densely as much information as I could into sort of one space. And that's of course, in the middle of class 4 automata. That's where the phase transition happens. And what's interesting to me is, and much of the literature that I read around the edge of chaos, most of it is pretty dated. And I wonder, and I just something I could do my own, some research personally, but I wonder why it seems like something people aren't really pursuing or talking about or interested in. Maybe it's because they felt like they reached the end of what was interesting about it. But to me, I guess intuitively, I feel like it seemingly applies in many different disciplines across, biology to physical systems, complexity. That I'm surprised that it's kind of just left aside.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know I've seen, have you looked into neuroscience? Like people are using this concept in neurodynamics, I think would be the word,
Hmm.
where the brain likes to be, just like any complex adaptive system, it likes to hang out on the edge of chaos
Yeah.
where all the good stuff happens.
Mhm.
And a brain that falls a little too much on the order side, is not good, and obviously in the other direction. I actually worked with a cardio researcher who was studying heart, who's studying the pacemaker cells at the bottom, the sinoatrial node, I think is what it's called.
Mhm.
And he demonstrated that modeling, the interactions between these cells, the heart wants to be at the right edge of chaos, right?
Mm.
Have you ever
Mhm.
heard that a heart that beats too regularly
Yes.
is not a
Yes.
good sign?
Yeah. You want variation.
And obviously, a heart that's fibrillating like mad is not good either. But
Hmm.
you want a heart that's a little bit speeds up, slows down. It's just
Yeah.
like hanging at the edge of chaos.
Hmm.
It seems like all biological systems want to be there.
Yeah. It's super interesting to me, and I don't know why it's not more prevalent or more talked about. I mean, this is a little tangent, if you don't mind. I'm
Yeah.
sort of going through a rebranding exercise, trying to figure out what I should sort of call my channel going forward, or consider,
Ah,
different options. I have a
yeah.
huge list of names and topics, and actually, Edge of Chaos is potentially something I might change it to.
That's a good one.
Um, I think so, possibly. I mean, people let
Yeah.
me know in the comments what you think of that one, if that's tickles people's fancy. But
No, I think it's great because it covers so many themes,
hmm
right? You
hmm
could have so many themes that fit within the edge of chaos. I I I go for it, man.
oh, you approve? Okay, well, if I got your
I'll
approval, then
I'll make
let's
some
change it.
visuals. I'll make some visuals for you. That'll be
Oh
fun.
my God, that would be cool. Oh man, I'll take you up on that. Thank you. Yeah, I still like the Ouroboros symbol quite a
Which one
bit.
is that? Oh yeah,
That's
the
the serpent chasing its
right.
tail for a number of
Yeah.
reasons. I think
Yeah.
I mean, it packs in so much meaning
It does.
to
Yeah.
me, and I think it's really interesting and cool. So I do want to keep that, but
Uh-huh.
sort of something I'll keep mulling over. I'll keep chewing it over and see where I go with that. So,
Hmm.
and I'd love to talk about a little bit about Christopher Langton, and you had mentioned to me even earlier that you had a short interaction with him many years ago.
Yeah. Well, I read his Edge of Chaos paper, and I think it was the first artificial life. This one, I think it was,
Hmm.
is it's edited by Christopher Langton, and I think one of the papers is Edge of Chaos. And I really studied that, and kind of at one point I was imitating his way of writing because I wanted to fit into that. But
Wow.
but but it was just interesting the way he described all of this. But yeah, I was at an artificial life conference in LA, and I met him, and we had lunch, and we were basically stuffing sandwiches in our mouths for 20 minutes and having a little bit of conversation. And then he went off to something. I was like, "Oh my God, I just met Chris Langton." It was just so fun. It was cool.
Sure. I mean, like the godfather of of A life, right? I mean, one of the founding fathers, you could say.
Yeah, certainly one of them. Yeah.
So we covered a little bit about cellular automata, but I think
Hmm.
certainly I'd say probably more interested even in artificial life.
Hmm.
And I've pulled up one of my favorite things of yours for sure, top five.
Cool. Hmm.
Genepool, which you had mentioned
Hmm.
earlier, is an extension of Darwin's Pond that you had
Hmm.
first made in the 90s. Was that
Yeah.
correct?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, this is your creation, or partly, other people worked on it too, but if you
Yeah.
want to tell the
Well,
audience what this is.
basically, this is, think of these as biomorphs in the Richard Dawkins sense. Each shape here is generated through a set of genes, genetic codes. And so there's an embryological phase that takes a string of numbers and turns them into body parts and shapes and colors and actually ways that they move. And so what we're seeing right now is just a whole bunch of completely random ones. If you click the whole pool at the very top right,
Hmm.
whole pool, you'll see that there are hundreds of them. that are all just kind of waiting to evolve. And here's how they evolve. So they have two goals in life: to eat little green dots and to mate with each other.
Mhm.
And so they're not going to mate if they're hungry. So they're going to look for food. And then if once they've eaten food, they have enough energy to mate. The thing is, I don't tell them how to swim. They have to figure that out by themselves.
Okay.
Actually, that's not saying it right, because by themselves, they are not learning how to swim. Their genetic pool is learning how to swim. So the evolution is the learning mechanism here. So if any of these are lucky enough to actually flail around where they can get to the thing that they want to get to, they will eat the food. And then if their flailing behaviors allow them to get to something that they want to mate with, they will have an offspring. And that alone is the one and only definition of fitness. So by virtue of being able to reach another swimbot, they're called swimbots, and mate, they will have the offspring. And there's a chance that the offspring will inherit some of those genetic building blocks that allowed it to reach its goal. But there's no definition of what it means to reach its goal. So one of these could swim by flipping its arms this way or that way, or by going backwards or going in circles. Whatever way works. And so what happens is, because it's in a local space, little gene pools emerge. And if you were to run this for about 15 minutes or half an hour, you'd see that happening. If you click on the graph there, down lower, yeah, right there, around there, you can see that the population of food bits and swimbots is being shown. And eventually, once this sort of gets to a point where things are starting to cook, you'll see the oscillation, the rabbit and fox graph that we've all learned about in population dynamics. That happens by itself automatically, which is a good sign that it's at least imitating some of these biological dynamics. But on top of that, I have a little sexual selection thing going on, where you can set it at tweak. Go to tweak, I believe, next to graph. Yeah, right, down at the bottom. What you can do is you can decide, and this could have been genetic and it might be a future project, but you can decide what they believe is beautiful. So if colorful is what a swimbot thinks is beautiful, then every swimbot, when it's ready to look for a mate, it'll look for the most colorful one. Or the biggest one. And interestingly, the still, small, and short are kind of contradictory to good swimming, right?
Right, yeah. Sure.
So, but what was interesting is, and this is the paper that I wrote for the conference in LA where I met Chris Langton, is the idea that you can choose those sexual selection parameters, and it still evolves, and weird things happen. So that's a demonstration of how sexual selection, the great big peacock tail or the moose antlers that are really, really hard to carry around, are so important for mating that they still have them. It's part of the species apparatus. So, so that's an interesting thing. And, I could one day come back to that, explore it more, which I'd love to do someday. But that's the basic idea.
It is so cool, and you can play around, and I highly recommend viewers find the link in the description and play around with this. I mean, really, it's so well designed too. I have to say, there's an info tab over here on the right where you can click through and get all the instructions, pretty basic, or you can just play through and see which of these organisms is the most prolific, which one has found the most mated the most. Which one is the most efficient, which is best at swimming, I bet, or best at acquiring food?
Most efficient means that it's expending the least energy.
Oh, okay, sure. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily mean it's the best swimmer, because it turns out that the most efficient ones are always these sort of sine wave eels that just go in a straight line. They burn very little energy, but they can't turn. If it's going straight, it goes, oh, wow, that's a babe over there. I want that one. It just can't turn. So the most efficient ones die off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what becomes, I mean, this is so cool. Sorry, if it's laggy on the screen share, I apologize, but I promise it's good on your browser if people are kind of looking at this. You can also pick out the oldest version, which is pretty mean. Because they die, they're going to die like right away, you know, every time. Old version,
sometimes
going to die pretty quickly. The glutton is the one that eating the most, having
eating
the best time.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can see mutual love. Okay, that's cool.
Mutual love is good. I show a little connection there to say these two are actually looking for each other. And what that brings up a question, which is, you know, it would seem natural that there should be mutual love before they can have an offspring. But I made the difficult decision to not require that. So one Swimbot might want to mate with another one, and the other one is trying to mate with yet another one.
Story of my life. Jeez.
You know
Jeffrey.
What I'm saying?
It hurts.
So, yeah, it hurts. But it actually makes the simulation run faster. So.
Oh, there you go. Whatever. It's more efficient. Fine. Who cares?
It's a cruel world.
It's a cruel one. Yeah, it is. Love is the battlefield. I want to know, so there's no fitness function here, which is interesting, right? And that's, I feel like in most A life, there usually is. Is that correct?
I don't know if I would say that with most A life. Certainly with the standard genetic algorithm technique, fitness function is part of that. And, you know, that's appropriate when you're using the genetic algorithm to optimize the design parameters of a spacecraft or a plumbing system or any complex system that has too many variables to design by hand. So you say, this is what we want. This is how we want to optimize it, and go evolve for that. In this case, there's no fitness function because, like I said, I don't say what swimming means. I don't say what it means to go fast or to be beautiful. Those emerge in the system. So, in other words, fitness is reproduction, and that's the Darwinian definition of fitness.
Absolutely, it's very pure to the idea. And may I ask, forgive my ignorance, but why do you use sine wave functions?
Oh, for the motions?
Yeah.
Well, they're not necessarily biologically accurate, but perhaps they are to a degree. I learned once that a violinist who's playing a really, really fast melody will go back and forth, and the muscles in the hand almost reach a perfect sine wave when it goes fast enough.
Cool.
There may be something natural about sine waves in the human body or animal body. Sine waves are very easy to mathematically control. So if you've got a sine wave, right, like this, I can change the frequency so it's faster or slower. I can also change the phase, which is which is a difficult one to conceive of, but it's important. The phase, you know, when it goes up and down.
Yeah.
And then there's the amplitude. How much? Those three parameters affect every part. So every single part of a Swimbot has a sine wave controlling it's the way it bends against its parent part. Furthermore, the direction of its goal affects the sine wave as well. Right. So, so like these two potential lovers here, they have a direction to the one that they're aiming for, and that, pardon the little stuttering there. I got to fix that bug.
Oh, it's okay. I'll try. I'll move to another one.
No, it's part of this. So, so if that makes any sense, and again, I don't define what those turning parameters should be like. I just tell it, you have the ability to change your phases, amplitudes, not your frequency. Frequency stays throughout the whole body. Phases and amplitudes based on turning, and then most of the phases and amplitudes for turning turn out to be useless, but a few of them put it in the right direction.
Gotcha.
And of course, those are the ones that propagate their genes.
Sure, sure. And are there any, I mean, what are some, I'm sure you have, you know this, you're the expert on this program, but have you learned any lessons from doing experiments, checking this out, like any surprises that stand out to mind?
Well, surprises. Gosh, it's hard to say. I mean, the answer is yes, for
Of course, yeah.
sure. I'm trying to recall, the long history of this. I do know that in the last a couple of years ago, I started working with an ecologist named Luca, and he was working in the Galapagos at the time, and so he and I did a project together, and we came up with a way to make let's see, it's right here in speciation. And we were going to write a paper about it, but we never got around to it. It's hard to describe, and it would take too long. So maybe at the video, you can put a link to our paper.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just take note of
But it
that.
was great to be working with an actual ecologist who worked for the Charles Darwin Foundation, of all employers. That was
Sure,
pretty
yeah.
exciting.
That is so cool. I will look that up and link to it. And I think
Yeah,
he's been in one or two of your videos, I believe,
yeah,
too. I've seen
yeah.
him. Actually, it's just reminded me of something that's kind of, it's interesting. Have you ever heard of this thing from psychology? Okay, it's just a brief tangent, but it's in a lot of like pop psych books about how what your name is can sort of have a big outsized influence on your interests or what you go into. So like the often cited thing is if your name is Dennis, you're three times more likely to become a dentist. Have you heard that before?
I haven't heard that. But
Okay, it's that kind of thing. Maybe it's
yeah,
not three times, maybe it's two times or
sure,
30%
sure.
or something. But two things stick out to me about that. One, this guy's name is Luca.
Yeah.
So last universal common ancestor, right?
Oh, interesting.
And
I wonder
this
if
is
he
a
knows this. He probably does.
this is a deep cut, okay? And I thought
Yeah.
this, and I wasn't sure I was going to bring it up, but do you think because your last name is Ventrella, you were interested in ventriloquism?
Well, I certainly was called that in high school.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, there was a guy who used to call me Ventrell, and then he would punch me in the stomach.
Oh, what a jerk.
Yeah, he was a jerk. But somehow that stands out in my mind.
Screw that guy.
No, that's a good question. I mean, that's really interesting. Yeah, could be.
But
It's,
you
it,
were you into ventriloquism? Is that true? I mean, I think I saw that in a video of yours. Oh, do you have something in the background?
yeah,
What?
yeah. When I was a kid. Yeah.
That's cool.
I never got into ventriloquism, but I was
Okay.
I was really interested in it, and I think maybe the magical, illusory aspect of that and the psychology was, yeah, okay, I'll
Yeah,
go
it's
with that.
interesting. I mean, this popped to mind. You said Luca, and I was like, okay, now I gotta give you that little tidbit. I do my research, you know.
Cool, cool. I wasn't
Obviously.
familiar with that acronym, Luca.
Oh, last universal common ancestor. Yeah. If you go
Oh,
back to the beginning of evolution, 3.5, 4 billion years ago, we don't even know. I don't think. I'm pretty sure we don't know what that was or is, or
yeah,
how the first biological cell formed. Probably just randomly.
right.
The boundaries worked out right, and the
Yeah,
thing formed right. But
uh-huh.
yeah, it's a commonly used acronym.
That's
So
cool.
Luca, and the other thing too, I think I may have seen this because you have this paper, I believe, Genepool.
That's an old one.
Do you see this
Yeah,
PDF? Yeah, I parsed through it,
yeah.
and I'll link to this as well because I thought it was neat. Where you talk about, I think maybe it was an early iteration, but something about how eels. Well, you were talking. You kind of mentioned this earlier. Eels
Yeah.
were like, but it sounded like I thought from the paper it sounded like they were dominating, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Well, they were before. The thing is, okay, this is a problem with artificial life simulations, right? Every simulation is going to be a gross simplification of reality just by necessity.
Yeah.
And so when you build an artificial life simulation, usually what happens is the genetic algorithm will find a way to exploit some missing piece of the physics or some weak aspect of the simulation, and it'll push into that space in order to do what it wants to do, in quotes. And so one of the best ways to make sure you have a good physics simulation is to use to build an artificial life simulation, because it'll exploit it. It'll break it.
Right.
Kind of interesting. Carl Sims talks about this in one of his early explorations. The eels have a way of just spinning around, and they do these like sort of like figure eight things, and they just go really fast because they have this eel anatomy, and they just kind of like clobber around and they eat food in their wake, and they do it in the stupidest way possible, but they evolve, and I'm like, go away, you damn eels. Sure. So Luca and I came up with a way to reduce that. It was a little bit of a hack, but not too much of a hack. Again, it's the paper. I'll point you to the paper and that we wrote, but I can't remember all the details. But yeah, those damn eels. I think one of the ways that we solved it was to change some of the turning mechanisms in the body. So it was a slight hack.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, you had to change the environment around, or the physics behind it to make
and
it
you know,
work.
as you can see, I don't like hacks, and I've had, you know, over the years, people say, oh, you should make them predators, you should make it do this and do that. I'm going, yeah, that's cool. In a computer game, you could add that feature to gamify it, but I don't want to just arbitrarily add a feature. I want it to emerge.
Sure.
So to have predation, you know, various other features of nature happen in here, I would have to go on to a very low level and build that into the laws of nature, and that would be a lot of work, but possibly worth the effort.
Yeah, sure. And one thing I would just point people to, if folks are interested, and I don't know if you've ever seen this paper, The Surprising Creativity of Digital Evolution.
Oh, that looks familiar, huh?
Yeah, this one came out, what year is this bad boy? 2019.
Okay.
I think I saw this first from 2 Minute Papers, a YouTube channel I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's a very good channel. And there's a lot of great little stories
cool.
from a range of people in artificial life. And it's a fun read. I'll link to it in the description, because I did a video, I don't know if you caught it, the A.I.Plays Dead video.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
right.
It's very like stark and scary, and
yeah.
beware of AI. And I don't think, from reading your stuff and listening to you, I don't think you share those like existential concerns around AI. But please correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, which concern are you referring
to?
Oh,
well, I mean, so that video is explaining Charles Offeria's research from, say, 20 years ago, where these digital organisms found a way around getting killed, basically, but getting deleted. That was very surprising to him and his team.
Yeah,
because
I saw the beginning of that video, but I didn't see the rest of it.
Oh, you got
it. And it's a famous artificial life program. What's it called? It's called, no, it's not Tierra. It's
Avita.
Avita, yeah.
Yeah,
right. It's one of the earliest ones. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And what's cool, it's open. I don't say it's open source, but people can download it and you can run experiments on your own computer. I think you run out of a browser even. I think it's very, very lightweight and easy to use. But
so what was the concern?
I wouldn't say there's so much concern. There's more, and it's in this paper. And I remember reading about it in a random article. I can't remember the magazine that it was in now, but a long time ago, like 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And the story really stuck out to me, and I put a pin on it, and I was like, I have to return to this. But he wanted to evolve. What do you want to do? He wanted to kill off digital organisms that like mated faster than their parents, I think. I'm kind of forgetting. It's my own video. Shoot, I'll link to it, so go watch it. But basically, they were able to distinguish when they were in a test environment versus the original environment that they were in. So he'd pull them into a test environment and then kind of monitor if they were replicating faster or not as fast as their parents. And they were able to figure out from the numbers fed into them that they were in a test environment, and they kind of exhibited something. Obviously, we're imposing a biological thing on them, but a thanatosis kind of effect of, say, playing dead. Right? And so he found this out, and it was very weird and surprising to them. And then they had some workaround for that. And then later, when he did kind of the same thing, but they had a fix for that, the patch for it, they started a strategy where they created sort of a mixed strategy in terms of how often they would replicate. So half the time they would replicate, half the time they wouldn't. And what they found was something to do with how it was monitored or how they read the in the test environment. Like they were able to sort of get around the parameters to be killed. So they found a way around it with like a mixed strategy, which is pretty, seems sophisticated to me. But then they found a workaround for that, and they were able to fix it. And it was never even in the original paper because it was kind of an oddity. But it's in this surprising creativity paper. If people and other kind of stories like that. So I just think it piques interest. It's kind of that's kind of cool. You build. I'm sure you've seen this in your career. You build a system and something happens that you didn't expect. Something emerges. That is really interesting.
Well, in a sense, you could say that designing an artificial life simulation, you want to be surprised. You want something to emerge that you didn't expect, and the more surprised you are, the happier you are. And this brings back something I wrote about Spore. You were asking me about Spore, the game Spore. And there's lots of reviews and opinions about Spore and what was great about it, and why some people were disappointed by it. I think it's really, really hard to make a game out of an artificial life simulation, especially a company like EA that they want to be able to have predictability in their games as a product that they're going to sell. So top-down design and bottom-up design mix very well if that's what you're doing, but it's a tricky balance. And I don't know Spore that well, but I think it's possible that artificial life game is an oxymoron. You can gamify artificial life to a degree. Yeah,
absolutely. And one thing I thought about a little bit, and these are some visuals of some classic A life. What I'm interested in, I might do a video about this in the future. It's going to take some sort of research and thinking about it. What kind of, if there are any broad lessons that can be learned from, applicable to our lives or animal life, from artificial life. And one thing I thought of was something to the degree that you kind of intimated at before is like, don't be boring or we'll turn you off.
So in other words, if an artificial life is boring, then we're going to shut it down. And how can you apply that to your own life? Well, I think the edge of chaos, it would be interesting to have artificial life simulations and measure how much it approaches the edge of chaos. That's what Langton did, and I'm sure there are many other research papers on that. Maybe I can find a way to measure that in my new project I'm working on. But I think finding your best space on the edge of chaos as a life design project is a good lesson, and artificial life might help build intuition for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree, and maybe it's overfitting potentially. I'm open to that, but I will find that when I'm most engaged in my life or activities, it's when I'm on that borderline between, and it's not just balance, because I feel like people say you need balance in your life, and it's like you can be balanced just standing there. You can just be balanced standing upright on the floor. You're not really doing much. But when you're on a high wire act and you're on the edge, then you're alive. You know, you're on a cliff. You're on the cliff edge, right? Holding on.
Yeah.
You're having the experience of feeling truly alive when you're doing something like that.
It's a dynamic equilibrium. It's dynamic.
Yes.
It stays in equilibrium by its motions, by its movement.
Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah. I was thumbing through this paper. Just I recommend people take a look at it and check it out. And then the last thing I'll say about Genepool is, I would love to see this. I mean, I think it's got so many applications to education. You know, a biology class in high school could take this, and I'm sure you could show this to students and have them run experiments and really intuitively learn and figure stuff out about evolution and Darwinian practices.
I hear from biology teachers every so often who say that they use this in their classes. So
that's cool.
Really
that's
glad
awesome.
to hear that.
Do they have lesson plans? Do they have structured?
They don't, and they've asked for that before. And that's one of the many things on my list, is to kind of build a more curricular accompaniment to this simulation.
Sure. Well, I'd love to see it, and if and when that ever happens, I'd love to share it, because I mean, if it's not clear to you people now, and this is, you know, well into this discussion, I'm a humongous fan of your work, and I think more people need to see it. And that's one of the things I try to do with my channel is, you know, bring up topics, try to popularize ideas and concepts that are underappreciated, and I think this definitely is. So thank you for that. And before we kind of come back around to, you know, your initial sort of around fractals, you know, this kind of huge passion of yours, I do want to share with people this really recent, it's only from August, exploring number theory with divisor patterns that you have on Vimeo. Even though I'm going to redirect people from YouTube to Vimeo, that's not good for me, but still, I'm going to do it, because
I can put it on YouTube.
You should put it on YouTube. Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, you have some YouTube stuff. You have a channel that you haven't uploaded in a while, but get it on YouTube. Yeah, the viewership is huge. And I mean, I love to, I will turn the sound down, because although I do like your narration is great and it's awesome. Can you tell folks about this and the genesis of the project?
Well, so divisor patterns, a long time ago, I was interested in polyrhythms, and so I wrote the numbers 1 to 100, and then below that I skipped and I wrote 2, 4, 6, 8, and then I did every third 3, and I continued that because I was interested in how polyrhythms match up and how far you can go before it gets chaotic. And I discovered that there was actually some math in there, that these numbers, if you look straight down, they become the divisors of the line of integers. And this was years ago. And then I read this book, Metamath, by Chaitin. And
who was the author of that?
Gregory Chaitin.
Gregory Chaitin, okay.
Yeah. And something in his book made me go, oh my God, that's the pattern that I did when I was 20 years old. And I threw the book down and I went to my computer and started programming it. And I started plotting this pattern out to not 1,000, not 1,000,000, but like quintillions. And these patterns came out. I was like, what the hell are these patterns? I was like, wow, that's cool. And then I realized that every single one of these patterns has a mathematical explanation. It has to. And so the most interesting discovery were the parabolas, which I don't think a whole lot of people have seen them yet, because at the time, not a whole lot of people were doing this graph thing. But now it's, you know, a lot of people have seen this pattern and described it. So I made this video. This was actually part of a competition of math explainers that's put on by Grant Sanderson. And so there were like 1,000 entries, and I got into the top 10%. But then they had like, I think 25 winners of the competition. So it was really fun to make this video.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I highly recommend it to folks that are interested in math visualizations. If you're into 3 blue, 1 brown, you're going to be into this, because I was blown away by it, and it's got some absolutely beautiful visuals. So I just want to plug that before we go to fractals.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
And let's just, yeah, do full circle to, I'm also going to share this too. This is a great presentation you did on biophilia. And could you describe what biophilia is?
Well, I think it was coined by E.O. Wilson. I'm not sure, and he's written about it. Biophilia is really just the human affiliation with nature, with the patterns in nature, and it underlies a lot of our aesthetic responses, what we think of as beauty. But it also affects what we think of out as ugly and repugnant, like snakes and feces and things that taste bad or things that look scary. These are all, very instinctual reactions to things, and they inform and underpin a lot of our aesthetics, informing everything, interior design and so on. And fractals really brings up an interesting point, which is that we kind of expect a highly textured world. These fractal patterns are things that our brain wants, and some research is pointing to the fact that certain fractal environments have a calming effect. And the most interesting part of me, and this is pushing up against the ooh-wow world, is that brain imaging has shown fractal patterns in the brain that are associated with different states of consciousness. So that's really fascinating stuff to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would I want to just thumb through this a little bit so people get a semblance, a Koch curve. And I mean, there's a lot of great stuff. And you also have slides that you link to in the description. So if people want to thumb through that as well, it's a wonderful presentation. And it's intersection of design and evolution. And how we can bring these things together.
Yeah. There's so many things that overlap. Having read more of the philosophy of Daniel Dennett and his theories about our biological origins and how that there he is right there, and the concept of affordances.
Sure. Gibson.
Which the fact that Gibson, the affordances as described by Dennett and other philosophers, and also described by Don Norman, who's the designer who wrote several books that I've read. Two different worlds that use the same concept. It's just so wonderful to see these concepts coming together and crossing over in biology, philosophy, and design.
Yeah, it is so cool. And one thing, sorry, did you have something?
No, but this picture reminds me, the book Scale by what's his last name? He's in Santa Fe. Forget his name. Jeffrey West. He describes a child going into the artery, the aorta of a whale, a model of a whale's aorta, which is giant, right? It's so huge that a child can fit into it. But the end capillaries of a whale are the same size as our capillaries or those of a mouse. There's a scaling factor of that is there are certain universal constants in all of these scaling factors that he describes in his book.
Sure.
And that was one of the themes that I was talking about in this talk.
Yeah, it's so cool. I loved it. It was a really nice talk.
And what was the quote? Yeah, here it is. Right.
Yeah, it's down here at the bottom. Let me try to.
When life needs to maximize exposure to the environment, it becomes fractal. A theoretical fractal curve has infinite length and a theoretical fractal surface has infinite area. Breathing organisms must maximize the surface of their respirating parts. The genetic code evolves a fractal seed, in quotes. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful encapsulation of, your interest in fractals. I think it's so cool. This is an area that I want to do more studying on and could bring you into my channel in some way, because I feel like there's a lot to unpack here. And just like you were saying, if we're finding these kind of patterns in our brains, you find it all throughout nature, in our brains. Many people, obviously, I think you may have even had people in psychedelic experience like sort of fractal patterns.
Yeah.
It's like whenever we see something that's in a lot of different places, we have to perk up and pay attention.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. These themes pop up in lots of different places. Those are good to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I came to all of this through art, right? And there have been times when I feel like I'm close to doing science or math or philosophy, but really the easiest thing is to say I'm an artist and I'm venturing into these different areas, and I think that's appropriate and useful to do that. It's a constant learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. We need people who can find the sort of, it's like you create a Venn diagram of all your different interests, and this is where you kind of landed. And it's so exciting to see. I can't wait to continue following your career, your arc, and your artwork going forward.
You've heard the word non-disciplinary. The new word is anti-disciplinary, which people are kicking around a lot these days. Right? Anti-disciplinary, kind of avoiding disciplines in order to stay in those margins, because that's where all the interesting ideas come.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if it's not apparent from my channel, like you've seen probably the disparate topics that I've covered.
Yes.
Probably too disparate, if I'm being honest. Sports to science to.
I applaud your venturing into. Yeah, I think it's great.
Trying my best. So, is there anything else you would like to cover? Anything else? Questions or?
I don't have anything. I don't have anything at the moment, but it's been a great adventure, and sometimes I feel like I'm somehow just getting started. If my fingers get a little bit of what do you call it? Finger problems. So I need to make sure that I take care of my hands, my eyes, and my brains most of all.
Me too. Stretch and get that all
together.
Great. I just want, Oh, sorry. Yeah.
It was really, really, really enjoyable talking with you.
Same. So, thank you so much for your time, your energy. I mean, this is great. I'm so excited for people to see this soon and interact with you and your channel and your art. And people can find you at ventrella.com. I think it's probably the main page, but I will link to everything in the description. And thanks so much, Jeffrey. It was a pleasure.
Great. Hope to collaborate with you someday on something.
Yeah,
I think
would love that.
Good energy there.
I agree. Absolutely.
Cool.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.